Welcome to the Biometric Update Podcast. I'm your host, Joel McConvey. Today's episode features a chat with Jeff Shiner, CEO of 1Password, about the topic of the moment, AI agents. It also gives us a peek into how 1Password is working with Formula One racing on data security. Jeff was on hand in Toronto for an event celebrating 1Password's partnership with the Red Bull Formula One Racing Academy and rising Formula One star, Alicia Pomowski. We caught up with him just before the big reveal of a new livery for Pomowski's car. I'm here with Jeff Shiner from 1Password. Jeff, thank you for joining us today. Very much appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
We're here to talk in large part about agentic AI. It was predicted by many at the beginning of this year to be a hot tech trend. Here we are, halfway through the year, and every second story I read is about AI agents. And of course, it's about why they're great, but also what the risks are. So at this particular moment in time, where does 1Password stand in the landscape of emerging agentic AI?
So I think 1Password, we are very emblematic of most companies in terms of we've got a ton of pressure on us from our board, from myself and others to say, hey, like this AI, sure, it's going to be overhyped, but it's also going to live up to that hype, maybe not instantly, but it is going to change the world. So there's both the side of how do we use it as a business ourselves to advance our business and to grow, but then how do we also incorporate it in terms of in our products where it makes sense to, and we have some specific challenges there given our just sort of very rigid stance on security and privacy. Mm-hmm. And then third, which is perhaps the most interesting to me, is how do we play a role as a company in allowing other companies, including ourselves, to take advantage of the value of AI and AI agents, but without risking their own security.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about that. What are, in your mind, the advantages of AI agents, and what are those risks that you are concerned about as someone or a company that takes security very seriously?
Yeah, I think the advantages to me are, I would say the immediate advantages where we're starting to see AI and AI agents immediately beneficial is in what I would call like the subtasks, not in the main tasks. Now it may grow to that over time, but and so what I mean by a subtask. So I think individuals use it probably in the same way that I use it. Help me turn this email into something other than chicken scratching and things like that. Summarize this and things like that. We were at an offsite a couple of weeks ago, and we wanted to create a template for some of the H2 planning that we were doing, and I'm like, can you give me a template? And that's just work that otherwise needs to be done, and it's important, but it's not going to be the ground changing. Develop my strategy for me work that I think some of the hype would indicate. So there's a lot of those subtasks, but a lot of times those subtasks are still important, but they also need access to, create me a template for something may not, but a lot of the work that we do, even if it's summarizing emails or Zoom calls or whatnot, there's a lot of access that it needs. So when I look at it from the risk side, I would say the biggest risk comes from the fact that right now there's a tremendous amount of pressure on companies from their boards, investors, and just the leaders in the companies to say, use AI, use AI, use AI, or figure out how to use it, or some variant of that. There's a ton of pressure on the actual AI companies, and whether that's the Anthropics of the world or whether that's companies that are building, AI into their products to say, make sure we have an AI side to that. And whenever there's that much pressure, then people can take the easy path. And the easy path can often at times be at the expense of quality or security or privacy. And so I think that's the challenge. So an example of that we're seeing is development. Mm-hmm. So if we think of agents today, and I used an analogy earlier where I said, AI agents today, there's a challenge with them somewhat like self-driving cars. If we could say, as of tomorrow, no humans are allowed to drive, self-driving cars would be a lot easier to build. And it's the same way. If everything were agents, and agents only talk to other agents, it would actually be easier to create standards. And whatever we mean by standards, whether it's a true standard or just a de facto standard, but common ways that they could talk and in ways that allowed both access and then the authentication and policy side, but they don't. So in a lot of cases, those agents need to interact with services that today are interacted with by humans. And the challenge there, if you're developing this agent or the agent's requesting that access, then all of a sudden that agent, which is not a human, needs human level access. And now you have to do things like, well, do we just give it a username? Do we turn off some of the MFA that's designed to prove that you're a human because it's not? There's all of these sorts of challenges that over time can be solved, but nobody's going to give it time. And so that's why we have the security for AI developers and our ability to say, here's ways that you can put those credentials in 1Password and have them securely retrieved at the time that they're needed for the duration of the time they're needed. So there's a lot of those sorts of challenges. So I would say that the security and privacy side today, my biggest concern doesn't come from just sort of the generic, hey, this is AI. It comes from the pressure that both those generating AI and those that are looking to seek to use AI are feeling to adopt it without necessarily having all of the pieces in place to understand how to keep it secure.
Interesting. Would you think that pressure is detrimental in any way to the progress of AI?
There is a side of it. I mean, again, pressure is there's always going to be two sides of the coin, right? I would say where I've seen it detrimental is in true adoption. And companies are saying, okay, I understand some of the theoretical benefits we will get. We're willing to bring it in and start doing some testing in areas that are either less risky from a security point of view or less risky from a business point of view as well, right? When they're trying to understand, am I really going to give this thing access to make decisions in this area? But because of the security concerns, because of the security, in some cases, security concerns, in some cases, I would say even just lack of understanding of how do we manage it from a policy point of view, not just the access side, but the policy and authentication side, then they're hesitant to roll it out. Mm-hmm. AI has an interesting challenge that normal access doesn't. And so if you think of something like Looker, or you think of something where you're doing a typical aggregation of data or it needs access to other data, you're going to build pipelines in between the two, and you're going to say, here you go and have access to read all of this information. So forth. An agent isn't going to do that. An agent's going to determine what access it or what it needs to access and what you're going to allow it to see to make the best decisions. Well, if we take an example of an agent, let's say we have an agent that is going to bid on keywords. That's what it's going to do. We'll ideally want to give it as much access as we can so that it can make the best decisions, and access to all of the history of the keywords and what we bid on them, access into things like Salesforce and what are our customers asking for, access into macroeconomic situations, access into the marketing trends of where we're going, what we're trying to push, access into my strategic direction of what's going to be important to us in a year, like all of those sorts of things you're going to want to. But then you're going to count on it to make good decisions in terms of what to bid on and how much to bid on. Mm-hmm. But then that's sort of the typical but super challenging problem of access and authentication. But then we're going to add one other thing which today humans do sort of naturally, and that is if I go and ask that agent, hey, we are sponsoring the Formula One Academy, I want to go and bid on and we wouldn't say bid on, but go and be aware or be available anywhere where the Formula One Academy is. That's different than the co-op who started yesterday saying that. And that's, so the agent may need the same amount or may want the same amount of data to make the decisions, but in a prompt world, that's not enough because, bluntly, whether I make a stupid decision, it should listen to it more than if somebody who we've hired just yesterday should. And that's not something that it does naturally yet. Yeah. So that's another challenge. And so you have to be able to understand what it's doing. You have to be able to cut it off at a moment's notice. Not just because of hallucinations. I know we talk a lot about hallucinations, but honestly, those will become less and less over time. I'm more concerned about the longer term scenarios that I think of and that every day just us humans make sort of naturally.
All right, so the flip side of the coin, you touched on this a bit. How is this helping 1Password? How are you making use of this technology in your mission to keep the world secure?
Yeah, I think there's it's all business, but there's like a broader business side, and then there's an individual human side. And as individual humans, I think, like, I just find it makes my day a ton easier when it's the small task today, admittedly, right? It's not what strategic decision am I going to make. It may get to that over time, but today I see real world value in the summarize this Zoom call or if we have 100 customer calls a week and I pull out trends and themes and stuff like that. It's those subtasks of things that we just would take huge amount of time away from me in doing, where I want to spend that time. And I think we can say that for most roles in the company, now to different degrees of what we're personally as a company using it, but whether it's a developer who's trying to understand an error message that they're an error in their code that they're getting, or trying to understand, is there a way I should be crafting this ESS, right? Is getting better at helping them with those decisions, and that so that they can again focus on what's more specific to the actual product side of doing that, or the design side, or that. We've got a big marketing enterprise GPT that we use to not only allow the marketing team, but allow any of us to go and start to understand, how do we craft the messages, how do we respond in a way that sticks with the message that we're getting as we release new products. How do we build that into that messaging? So again, I would say that there's a lot of sort of the standard uses of it at an individual level. And if I'm honest, today that's probably the biggest benefit we are getting. Like many companies, we're in a whole bunch of different trial phases of the broader business level tools, and some tools have just been are being used, and that. And it's sort of like Notion's a good example, where we use a lot of the AI for, within Notion, times to the point you don't realize you're using AI, because we're using a Notion, or we're using a Zoom, or, we're using, Kindness to help with customer support, or we've got, I think Ada is powering our AI chatbot. And we're not saying, hey, we're doing AI. We're trying to give the best experience we can to a customer who wants to get an immediate response on the web. But we're also then, I think, like many companies, testing things like, I think it's probably Cursor and Claude Code and stuff like that. But that's still a lot of testing areas, or being used in more localized areas.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Because everyone uses AI, but it's only really recently we've been able to talk about it in this way. And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done in defining these different things and what we talk about when we talk about AI, so to speak.
Yeah, because it keeps changing. I mean, I would have said we used quote unquote AI for, I don't say a decade, but for years, because we had ML engines, right? And now it's like, well, that's not AI. Well, okay, well that like it's like AI, whatever, 0.5, or and is AI now going to be, is ChatGPT going to be AI, or is it AI only going to be an AI agent? Like, if we look at it from the underlying fundamentals of the math and the underlying engines that are running it, while they obviously continue to change, right? We've still been using it in some way or form for many years.
Yeah, I think tech sometimes outpaces the language,
Yes, yeah, and then we become a little bit particular about the language, right?
We could talk about AI for a long time, but I also want to touch on the reason you're here tonight, which is something totally different, which is Formula One.
It's not all that different, but
tell me why.
Yeah, so Formula One, and in particular, the Red Bull Racing Formula One Academy. So tonight we're here with Alicia, who's one of the preeminent drivers in the Formula One Academy. And why do I say it's not all that different? When we first started looking at getting involved with Formula One, it had nothing to do with the fact that I am actually a Formula One fan for the last 40-odd years. I'd like to take credit or blame for, I'm not sure which, but it was Melton who did that research. But what we started to realize was Formula One has many of the same challenges that most very sophisticated businesses do, but they have it in kind of a unique situation. So what is that challenge? That challenge to them is, if you look at any Formula One race, it's tenths of seconds, especially qualifying, right? Qualifying in particular is tenths of seconds that get you from the first row to the third row, or gets you into the third round of testing in that. And they make tremendous differences. But those tenths of seconds and sometimes hundreds of seconds comes down to massive amounts of data that is fed to them, and that is extremely confidential to them, and in their case, them versus the team that's 20 meters to their right or left, right? And it all goes through the same FIA data center, that's on-site data center, and then is streamed to them. So it comes back down to, how do they protect their IP? How do they protect all of this data? How do they still get it available to them? Because they need it. Not only do they need it at that moment where they are, whatever country and track that is. And it's a fascinating, I call it a fascinating security problem. To them, they look at it very much as a fascinating IP and strategy problem that needs to be secured. And so when we started to look at that, we started to say, well, independent of sponsorship, that problem is huge, that problem is real, and that problem is wherever they are, with whatever device they're on and whatever location they're on, and track and testing and all of that. So it's a fascinating problem. So that's what got us interested from the security side and from the technology side. Obviously, from a brand side, Formula One is huge, and it's huge worldwide, and that's our audience is a worldwide audience. And my first race was, I want to say 83, and somebody can correct me because I'll be wrong, but in the early 80s they had, I think, 3 races in Detroit. I grew up in Windsor. Yep. And so my dad took me there when I was a teenager, which shows you how old I am now. But it's and so I've grown up with Formula One. What's exciting to me about the academy is the Formula One sponsored academy that is bringing in women drivers up through the ranks. And so Alicia's a great example, who was in karting and then GB4 and now in the Formula One Academy. And we had a tremendous opportunity where we could add a little bit of Canadiana to that event. So the livery that we will be revealing today, we partnered with a Canadian artist to design that for the upcoming race that Alicia will be driving in. So it'll be an exciting reveal. I've not seen it in real, and I've not seen it. So I will see the reveal live at the same time as everybody else. I'm excited, but it's a tremendous opportunity to be a part of technology, be a part of security, be a part of racing, and be a part, in this case, of some Canadian. So it's exciting.
There you go. The fact that you haven't seen it in real shows just how tight the security is here, I guess.
Yes,
they won't even show it to you.
I suspect you've seen it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to chat and learn a bit more about 1Password and about the Red Bull Racing Academy and your relationship. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you again.
Yeah, it's been great chatting. Awesome.
Thanks again to Jeff Shiner, 1Password, and the Red Bull Formula One Racing Academy for hosting us. For more on 1Password and the evolution of agentic AI, be sure to visit www.biometricupdate.com.